When I became a sales leader, my first boss, Pete, he gave me one piece of advice I've never forgotten. He said, "Your salespeople want your time." And at that time, I thought he meant coaching. And it took me more than a decade to realize he meant something much, much bigger than that. My name's Dave Pender. I've spent the last 27 years in sales and sales leadership. And on this channel, I share practical ideas, mistakes I've made, and leadership blind spots that can make a real difference to the way that you lead and sell. Now, look, we all know sales is a tough profession, right? It's exciting and it can be super stressful. In fact, more often than not, it is super stressful. Targets, forecasts, customers disappearing, quarter end pressure, year end pressure. The highs are high and the lows can be really low. And even the most independent salespeople, they usually want one thing. They want to know someone in the org has got their back. And one of the simplest ways that you can show that as a leader is by giving them your time. Now, pre-COVID, I had around 50 people in my team, and I made it my business to have a coffee with each one of them at least once a quarter, ideally in person, and when necessary, I do it remotely. And most of them weren't my direct reports, which was kind of the point, right? Sometimes we talk about work, sometimes we talk about life. Sometimes I'd ask them, like, what do you want from me? Or what could we be doing better? And other times I would just listen. And those conversations, they certainly help me understand my people like far more than any spreadsheet ever could. And I love a good spreadsheet. And they also meant that if I ever needed to call someone unexpectedly, it wasn't awkward because we already had a relationship. Now, one of the best leaders I've ever worked for, he took this to another level. His name was Ramsey. He was the president of our division, an incredibly senior, incredibly smart leader in a huge global business. And everyone knew how busy he was. But if you wanted his time, he found a way, right? He'd sit down with salespeople who were 4 or 5 levels away from him in the organization. He'd accept their invites to meet with him when he was in town. He'd organize roundtables. He'd grab a coffee. He'd stop by and chat at your desk. He'd stop and chat with you at conferences. And he would always ask, "So what's on your mind?" And then he'd ask, "What do you need? How could we be better?" And when you were talking to him, he had this incredible ability to make you feel like you were the only person in that moment that mattered. Now, if you knew Ramsey, I know you're smiling right now because you had one of those chats with him. You probably had multiple. People loved working for him for lots of reasons. And that was certainly one of them. And the bit about Ramsey making you feel like you were the only person that mattered, that's super important because giving people your time, it only works if you're actually there. If you're checking your phone or looking at your watch or thinking about the next meeting or what you're having for dinner that night, people know, right? We can tell the difference between someone who is physically present and someone who is mentally present, who is actually there with you. And really, I would rather you cancel like the meeting than sit through it being distracted because your attention, that is the real gift. And before anyone panics, I am not suggesting you suddenly find another 10 hours a week to chat with everyone in your organization. That is not the message, right? My message is use the time you already have more intentionally. Walk to lunch together, grab a coffee, call someone on the drive home, invite a small group for 30 minutes. And if you've got a huge org, like hold roundtables, right? It doesn't have to be perfect, just do it your way. It just has to be pretty regular and it has to be genuine. So I challenge you, like, look at your calendars for the next quarter. Delete some of those meetings you know aren't worth your time and replace them with the ones that are. Like, think about that monthly recurring meeting that you hate going to. You multitask your way through it. You could have 4 virtual catch-ups with people in your team for that whole amount of time. The other thing I've found is that when you've invested that time consistently, those difficult conversations become easier. Like big organizational changes, they become easier for people to understand. Feedback lands better. Trust is already there. So you're no longer having conversations with strangers or telling strangers to do something. You're talking to people who know you and who know that you actually care. So the question I would leave you with is, if I asked every salesperson in your team, does your manager make the time for you? What would they honestly say? Because they won't remember every conversation that you have about coaching, and they sure as hell won't remember every forecasting call, but they will remember whether you made time for them. And over a career, that makes a remarkable difference. If you've enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate it if you like it and subscribe to the channel and hit that little bell icon that reminds you each time we post. And for this one, I would love to know in the comments, who was the leader that gave you their time and what difference did it actually make to you? I'll see you next time. Let's go.